Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up and our Pixar season of reviews and rankings to mark the release of the studio's 20th feature film release, The Incredibles 2, this summer. If you've journeyed through the Pixar canon with us over the last month, we've now made it to the final video in this season, and we've saved the big one for last. Everyone's list is different because film is subjective, but after a lot of thought, we present to you our ranking of all 20 Pixar films. At number 20, kicking us off is the film that will be no surprise to anyone. With the number of Pixar ranking videos we've seen, we were hoping that we might be able to buck the trend by not placing Cars 2 at the bottom. Yet, sadly, sitting comfortably on the bottom of the pile is Pixar's weakest sequel. Worse than this was the film the studio decided to release in the follow-up to their golden era of films, coming directly after the critically acclaimed Toy Story 3. Giving side character from the first film Mater a central role wasn't Pixar's finest hour. This is a messy, overcrowded film with regrettably little to recommend it. At number 19 comes the next film chronologically in the canon, Brave, from Mark Andrews and Brenda Chapman. It's the most un-Pixar-looking Pixar film, as we discussed in our review of the film, and whilst it isn't as bad as Cars 2, coming directly after it, we expected something far more memorable from this original Pixar adventure, and it's essentially a forgettable entry. Next in the ranking, at number 18, it's the third film in as many to have come from this last decade of Pixar alone. Another sequel that's not even close to being as charming as the original, Finding Dory sees another side character from the preceding film taking centre stage. This time, however, it's the likeable Dory, voiced again by Ellen DeGeneres. A fun, if uninspired, sequel. At 17, it's time for Pixar's second feature film, and it was a fair, if pedestrian, follow-up to the studio's groundbreaking first, Toy Story. Flick is your typical underdog protagonist, and Kevin Spacey, voicing Pixar's first real villain, Hopper, are the film's strengths, but there are much stronger films to come in this list. In at 16, we're back to Pixar's output from the 2010s with the studio's first prequel as we learn how Mike and Sully first met at university. Initially hating each other, but growing to understand and appreciate each other's friendship. Monsters University is often funny, but doesn't have quite the same impact that the original had. Next up at number 15 is our second entry for the Cars films, and this is sorely underrated by most film fans. Radiator Springs is an interesting little microcosm in which to set the majority of the film, and the film itself has a great deal of heart which drags it up from the bottom of the ranking. It still, however, sits in the latter half of the canon. Taking its place one spot above the original in our ranking at number 14 is one of Pixar's latest efforts, Cars 3. McQueen has become wearisome of racing as there's a new competitor in town. It's time for him to put others in the spotlights. Brian Fee comes aboard to direct, and this is easily the best of the three Cars films to date, breathing new life into the franchise. Unlucky number 13, but not in this case, as this is the highest we've seen it to date on a ranking of Pixar's films, and we've watched most of them on YouTube. It's the lesser received film from 2015, The Good Dinosaur, which deserves to be placed higher than the bottom of the Pixar pile. From director Peter Sohn, it's the hugely emotional tale of Arlo, the eponym of the story, fending for himself and meeting a new companion along the way, all the while understanding the importance of companionship and not judging people on first impressions. This is Pixar at some of their most beautiful, with incredibly realistic and sharp animation. The story may be slight, but this adventure is the most vastly underrated in the canon. Next on our list at number 12 is the most recent Pixar feature, the studio's 20th in their first 23 years, The Incredibles 2. Back are all the central characters from the first film, and director Brad Bird returns to oversee proceedings. The action is ramped up from the first film, but the villainous aspect of the film is a bit of a predictable letdown. A solid, if not standout entry in the canon, but certainly the best of the studio's recent run of sequels. Up next, and just missing out on our top 10 and consequently lower than you might expect, is one of the most beloved and original of all of Pixar's features, Monsters, Inc., with the charming buddy relationship between Mike and Sully leaping off the screen. Released back in 2001, this was the perfect end-of-year antidote to the terrible events happening in the real world at the time, and spawned the first Pixar prequel 12 years on. Into our top 10 Pixar films, and just as its sequel is getting released this summer, next in our ranking is Pixar's first foray into the superhero genre with the best incarnation of the Fantastic Four we've been given yet on screen. 2004's The Incredibles is witty, sharp, colourful, brilliantly animated and fast-paced, which is no mean feat considering it's one of the studio's longest so far. At number 9 is a film that might surprise Pixar fans that it's not higher, 2009's Oscar-winning Up. Director Pete Docter really pulls it out of the bag here and takes audiences on an emotional roller coaster. If the opening montage doesn't have you blubbing, the scene where Carl looks at the back of his and Ellie's adventure book will. This is a sweet, engaging 10th feature from the studio, but there are some that just have the edge over this. And at number 8, one of those aforementioned is this, Pixar's first feature to bag the Oscar for animation, 2003's Finding Nemo. This was Andrew Stanton's Pixar directorial debut, and it's an assured one. This is funny, emotional, and the animation of underwater life is often breathtaking. Pixar's fifth is one of the strongest films in the canon. Number 7 on our list could be another surprise. The first appearance in our ranking for the Toy Story films, and trying to rank the Toy Stories is a little like trying to choose your favourite child, as this is obviously one of the most creative, brilliant trilogies of films of all time. The third best of the films thus far, though, in our opinion, is Toy Story 2. Whilst the sequel promised even greater clarity in animation, a wider range of characters, and the first real tearjerker scene in Pixar history, Jesse's story, it's still the lesser of the three. Narrowly sitting outside our top 5 is 2015's extraordinary Inside Out. Pete Docter, once again at the helm, delivers one of Pixar's most original ideas and takes the idea down limitless avenues as the studio now make us all wonder what our emotions are thinking inside our heads. With refreshing, well-fleshed-out characters and a unique concept, Inside Out is the first Pixar masterpiece to appear on our list. We begin the top 5 with a film we've had a soft spot for ever since we first saw it, first time around in the cinema, and blubbed at the end. The story of WALL-E is straightforward but dazzling from the very beginning, and is director Andrew Stanton at his most brilliant to date. First mooted in Pixar talks back in the very early days, it would take developments in computer animation to reach such a level that would make WALL-E not only possible but spectacularly animated when released in 2008. In a blockbuster year of sequels like The Dark Knight and Quantum of Solace, WALL-E was beautifully original and represented Pixar at their most inspired. Having the entire first act play out like a silent film is one of Pixar's brightest ideas. WALL-E is a joy from start to finish, and let nobody tell you otherwise. In fourth place, controversially perhaps, given this film is often regarded as the Pixar pinnacle, we have 2010's Oscar-winning Toy Story 3, and the film that was the culmination of Pixar's golden era. This is a confident threequel, surpassing the excellent second film and making audiences genuinely care for these wonderful toys we've all grown up with. Andy is getting older and embarking on the next chapter in his life, going to college, so it's time for him to part company with his old toys, but there's still one more adventure to be had. The animation in this film is stellar, and this is the studio really pulling on our heartstrings on a number of occasions, none more so than in a moment where you believe this might be the end for our heroes, as well as in a parting of the ways at the end of the film. This is a smart, engaging Pixar film that reminds us how much we fell in love with Woody, Buzz and Co. in the first place. Into the top 3, and just as we've placed The Good Dinosaur higher in our ranking than most YouTubers, I think we've probably done the same for Pixar's gorgeous 8th feature Ratatouille at number 3. As soon as the tantalising trailers were released back in 2007, ahead of the film's release, it was clear to see that this was going to showcase even greater detail in animation than ever before from the studio. We've already gushed about how Remy is one of Pixar's greatest characters, and Ratatouille is equally one of Pixar's greatest gems. This is a polished, perfectly paced adventure with a strong beating heart at the centre. Every character leaps from the screen, and the animation of Paris and its inhabitants is astonishing. This is undoubtedly one of Pixar's very best. So we come to the top 2 Pixar films in our ranking on this channel. We've spent the last month going through all of Pixar's 20 feature films thus far, and choosing between first and second place is extremely tough. One is an old classic, and the other is one of Pixar's newest and best. The film that just misses out on our top spot is the former of the two, the film that kicked Pixar Studios into the stratosphere on release in 1995, Toy Story. The animation is still remarkable today, over 20 years on, and the characterization and humour are some of the absolute greatest in Pixar history. Woody and Buzz, voiced by Tom Hanks and Tim Allen respectively, are two of Pixar's very best characters, and the story, though straightforward, is universal in its depiction of friendship and loyalty, and offers interesting ideas as to what toys might get up to when humans' backs are turned. With one of the studio's very best scores from composer Randy Newman, Toy Story delivers, and then some. It's easy to see why this usually appears at the top of Pixar rankings. So we've come to our number 1 Pixar film in our ranking of all of their 20 feature films. For us, despite the brilliance of the majority of the studio's output, we knew after our first viewing of the film that Coco would replace all others at the top of the pile. This is Pixar's crowning jewel, the ultimate story of family and acceptance. The animation is stellar, the score is outstanding, and the characters are first-rate, in particular one of Pixar's greatest protagonists, Miguel. He is our eyes into the majestic land of the dead, and the character arc throughout is beautiful to watch. The sequence alone where Miguel plays the guitar for Mama Coco in order for her to remember her papa is enough to propel this to number 1. This is an emotional, crowd-pleasing, creative masterpiece that deserves its place at the top of our ranking. It might seem a little too soon to be leaping this much praise onto one of Pixar's most recent films. Most viewers are probably thinking we should have an older Pixar classic at the top, but just like Miguel, we're going with our heart, and Coco is the best Pixar film so far. There you have it, our ranking of the Pixar films. It's not definitive in the same way that none of the other ranking videos you might watch are, but it's our thoughts on the output from this groundbreaking animation studio. Thanks for journeying with us through the back catalogue of Pixar, starting all the way back in 1984 with Andre and Wally B, up to the most recent Bao and The Incredibles 2. As we've promised in an earlier video, there's plenty to look forward to from Pixar in the near future, and if you're anything like us, you'll be first in line to see every new release. Please comment below and let us know your ranking of the films. How do you think we fared with our assessment of the 20 Pixar features to date? Don't forget you can find Crawford-Clark Close-Up on Facebook and Twitter, and if you're feeling inclined, you can drop us an email to leave us thoughts and suggestions for the future of the channel. What series do you think we should review next? Details are coming up shortly. Stay tuned to the channel as we'll shortly be bringing you reviews of the latest releases, including Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, as well as a season of Mission Impossible reviews in the run-up to this summer's surefire hit, Mission Impossible Fallout. There's plenty to come from Crawford-Clark Close-Up. For now though, thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.